Welcome to Beatsource Tech. My name is Mojaxx and today we are returning to a product which I made a first look video about all the way back in December of 2022. It's been 3 months since then, but the RANE 4 has finally hit store shelves and is available to buy. So the question we're asking today is, was it worth the wait? Very quickly, for those who haven't been following along, the RANE 4 is a 4-channel controller for Serato DJ Pro. It unlocks the full version of that software and is focused around really taking advantage of the recently added stems feature from Serato, and is the first hardware to be designed with that in mind. We knew a lot about the 4 when I did my first look, but there was one piece of important info that we didn't: what it was going to cost. Well, now that it's hit store shelves, we know that the street price is $1,700 in the US. Putting that into some context, it's $300 less than the Pioneer DJ Rev 7 and $200 more than the RANE 1. So whilst it's certainly up there in the highest echelons of controller pricing, I think that's perfectly reasonable. There's absolutely $200 of extra value packed in here compared to the very popular one. I'd say much more than that, in fact, as long as you're okay with static jogs instead of spinning platters. Getting into those platters, they are of course controversial. RANE has been a company primarily associated with hip-hop and open format DJing for a while, although they have a long history in the house and disco scenes too. And so seeing a new device from them without spinning platters was a shock to many. But I'll reiterate what I said in my first look. RANE aren't dropping spinning platters in general, they've assured me of that. And it's important to remember that static jogs are actually much more popular when it comes to unit sales across all brands. That might be a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but it's still a fact. I know plenty of DJs in my life who have been working professionally for 20 odd years and have never used a spinning platter in their career, especially here in the UK, where turntables in venues haven't really been a thing since the early 2000s, which means that RANE expanding their potential market to include those who prefer static platters is really a no-brainer. All that would be moot if the platters on the 4 weren't good though, and thankfully they are. They use capacitive touch instead of being mechanical like CDJs, which is not generally my preference, but the responsiveness here is right on point, and the lines on the top surface give them a vinyl-like grip under your fingers. They're a very healthy size at 8.5 inches in diameter, with the tops being almost identical in dimensions to the control discs on the RANE 1. The side edges with their 1200-esque strobe dots do look a touch out of place on platters which don't spin, but in terms of ergonomics they work nicely for pitch bending. When it comes to how the jogs respond when cutting and scratching, I'm a big fan. There's none of the heavyweight feel found on some other platters from the InMusic stable, like on Denon DJ gear. Instead, you get a nicely light feel, which lets you control your music with ease without being uncomfortably loose. I've seen criticism from some that the feel is a touch too light for them, and I can understand that. For me, they are pretty much perfect, but it would have been nice to see a tension adjustment for those who have differing tastes. In the middle of the jogs are the displays, which offer a wealth of information. There's a full colour overview waveform, time, remaining or elapsed, pitch, pitch range, BPM, beat jump and loop values, a playhead indicator with a timeline running around the outside, and it tells you which deck you're controlling. There's also a very obvious indicator when you change decks. It's bright and clear, although things are a touch fuzzy from some angles. I think that relates to how far the actual display is from the top surface, but overall I have no complaints. And if it's info you want, well, there are more screens, 9 of them in fact, and those are all monochrome OLED displays, so they look great with super deep blacks. There's one in the middle for the effects and menus, with lots of options for setting up the 4 exactly as you wish. And then there are 4 more above each set of performance pads, which we'll look at now. I want to take a closer look at these pads on here, because if you're looking at a pro-level Serato DJ Pro controller, you're probably familiar with the pad modes within the software and what they do and so on. But this, thanks mainly to these 8 OLED displays, 4 on each deck, actually kind of brings something really new to the table with that. Firstly, we can see I'm in hot cue mode right now, and we've got my cue point names. So obviously I've named these to that, and I can jump around to those, and that's really kind of neat in itself immediately. So if you use cue point names, you're going to love this. I don't generally use cue point names because they're only on my laptop screen as a rule, but here this makes me think maybe I want to use cue point names, so that is fantastic. We've then got pitch play, so we double tap, that puts us in pitch play, and we can see again we're taking advantage of these screens. It tells you the root note and then semitone up and semitone down and so on. We've also got a third pad mode on that one as well. We hold shift and hold hot cue. That is a user mappable mode there. So you can MIDI map that to anything within Serato DJ Pro or other software you're using alongside it, maybe Sound Switch, something like that. That's a useful third mode on there. And then we have roll. So I've got beat jump enabled in Serato DJ Pro. So there's my beat jump controls, and you can see the text is actually lining up with that. So it's telling me where I'm jumping and the beat value and so on, along with your rolls up the top, and we can adjust the parameter. And you can see again, that's updating. So I know when I hit that roll, that's a 1 beat roll, that's a half beat roll. Again, this is something you don't always know without looking at your laptop screen as a rule, which is fantastic. Saved loops again, so double tap, we've got saved. I don't have any saved loops on this track, but your saved loops will appear there as well. Then we've got sampler, and this, again, awesome. You can see, according to which bank you're in, like this bank has got no samples in it, this one has got all of these in there. Not only does it show me what's in each sample bank, or each sample pad, but it also scrolls to show you as well when you first go to it. That's fantastic. You know, again, the sampler, sometimes I get lost if I have multiple banks on the go, then I don't know what's on there, I don't know which one I'm going to hit, and this is brilliant from that point of view. And likewise, scratch bank as well. Double tap, we got scratch bank, and again, with the titles of everything in the scratch bank. This is just, it levels up the pads in a really significant way as far as I'm concerned. Stems, we have a dedicated stems pad mode, so you can see vocal, melody, bass, drums, and then the vocal echo, instrumental breaker, drums echo, etc. Again, so not only are you getting the colors from the pads telling you what's going on, but you're also getting this text, and they're OLED display, so it's very clear, very visible. And finally, double tap on that one, slicer again. So it's just a really, really nice way of working. So that's all cool, but then there is another layer to this as well, in that you also have split pad modes. So I can, for example, if I switch to hotkey, hold down hotkey and press roll, I've now got the top row of my hotkeys there, and I've got the bottom, I've got the top row of loop rolls. And we can do that with hotkey and sampler, for example. So hotkey and sampler, now I've got hotkeys at the top row of samples at the bottom. And it works the other way around as well. So stems, for example, I hold down stems and hotkey, now I've got stems at the top, and I've got my hotkeys at the bottom. So this is just, it's a really powerful way of working, combining these pad modes together on the one set of pads. What you can't do, as far as I can figure out, you can't do a secondary one. So I can't do scratch bank and then hotkeys. I can't do save loops and then hotkeys, for example. That won't work that way. It's always just the top layer. But hotkey, roll, sampler, and stems, you can absolutely do any of those in any combination that you like. So I could do sampler and roll. I could do stems and roll. I could do stems and sampler. You know, so whichever way around you want it to go, it's easy to work out the logic of it, but absolutely, this is a fantastic feature, which I'm always happy to see on Serato DJ Pro equipment. One final note on the pads, they are proper MPC style pads. Akai is another in-music brand, and they feel great. They're large, responsive, and bright enough to be clearly visible in most environments. Pulling back to look at the rest of the hardware, it's just typical RANE. If you've used any other recent RANE gear like the 72 or 70, the 12s or the 1, you'll know exactly what to expect here. Solid metal construction all round. Combined with the large size, the 4 is almost 31 inches wide and 16 inches deep, that makes the 4 fairly substantial to carry around. But at 18.25 pounds, it's actually a lot lighter than the smaller RANE 1, which weighs in at 23.5 pounds, and that's down to the platter situation. Certainly the 4 is easily portable if you have a soft case big enough. I took it out to gigs in one without issue. Sound quality will again be familiar to those who've used other recent RANE kit. Cirrus Logic 24-bit 48kHz DACs with 32-bit processing make for a clear, crisp output, and the 4 sounded great to me on both studio monitors and venue sound systems. There's always something about the voicing of RANE gear which seems to give a little extra oomph in the low end, and I find that very pleasing. Looking at the connections, there should be enough for most pro users here. There are 2 mic inputs, both with XLR and jack combo sockets. Each has its own set of controls, with mic 1 on the top panel and mic 2 on the front. They both have a dedicated level control and 2-band EQ. I know some would prefer 3-band, but I'm cool with that. And mic 1 has an echo too, adjustable in settings. The preamps sound great in use, with my only note being that I could use a touch more gain for studio dynamic mics, but with SM58 style mics you should be just fine. The microphones can be sent to the USB output for streaming, as well as to the booth and headphones, or not, depending on your requirements. The outer 2 channels, 3 and 4, can be used with external inputs, switchable between line and phono level. The phono preamps are decent enough for playing some vinyl through, and you can even use the inputs for DVS if you have that Serato expansion, although the decks would be rather far apart for my taste. Output options are on point with master out on balanced XLRs and unbalanced RCAs, and there's a hardware mono stereo switch. Plus there's a booth output on balanced jacks with its own level control. Juice is provided via an internal power supply with an IEC socket, always my preference. And finally there are 2 USB-B ports for connecting to computers. I'm very happy with the queuing system on the 4. Each deck has an individual cue button, there is a cue master blend knob and a physical split cue button. Output is loud and clear and there are both sizes of headphone jack, nothing more to ask for there. Moving on to the controls, I was pleased to see that RANE have made great use of all the space available to them on the 4. There are tons of controls on here but nothing feels cramped, with one possible exception. To the left of each deck are the transport controls with a massive play pause button, awesome. But then above it is the cue button, which is like a third of the size. As this is a static platter device, you'll probably be using that button a lot, and I'd have much preferred that RANE make that bigger and made the sync button, which is not one anyone needs to press often, much smaller. Besides that though, things are truly comprehensive. Besides the pads and stems controls, which I'll get to, you have a dedicated loop section, key adjust, pitch bend, which I love, a full-size accurate pitch fader, pitch range button, browsing controls on each deck, sensor and slip controls, and a beat jump section with a rotary encoder and a pair of buttons. There's even a quantize button above the mixer, which seems to often be missing from Serato hardware. One thing which people missed on the RANE 1 was a sampler level knob, and that's present and correct here, although you can assign the sampler to channel 4 if you want even more control. With many of these also offering secondary functions on shift, I really feel like RANE have gone above and beyond to offer DJs every control they might want here. And there was only one thing missing for me when I first tested the 4, Silent Cue. That's a feature in Serato DJ Pro which I use very often in conjunction with stems, so I was disappointed, but in the final release firmware the company have added the ability to swap sensor to Silent Cue in the menu, which is how I had manually remapped it anyway. As far as I can tell, they really just did that to make me happy, so thanks for that RANE, it did. There's really not much to write home about with the EQs, they shape the sound well and are spacious, or indeed the up faders, but it's worth passing comment on the crossfader. It's one of RANE's Mag 4 units, as found on their recent battle mixers and the One. It's a fader I've spent a lot of time with and I'm generally a fan. It retains the slight angular shape of the cut-in which is traditional to RANE faders, and it feels great in hand. On the 4 you have cut-in distance adjustable in the hardware menu, and the ability to also adjust the tension, although you'll have to remove the fader panel to get to that. For me, the only slight negative is that I do find the 4 can get a little sticky after a while. Nothing that a quick clean and lube with Deoxit can't fix within about 10 minutes, and then it's as good as new. But I do have to point it out, as that's not the same experience I have with some other high-end faders. The channel effects on the 4 are quite interesting, as unlike the main effects, they're actually done in software in Serato DJ Pro. So when that's not connected, you only get a combo filter, but when it is, you also get filter roll, noise, and a flanger. These all sound good, and I'm pleased to report that the filter roll has been much improved since the early beta version I was playing with in December. It was almost unusable then, but now I'm really into it. Moving on to those main effects, my big issue with the RANE 1 was that it didn't have any hardware effects. It relied solely on Serato's FX suite, which I've said many times on here I'm not really into. So I was delighted that RANE have developed a full set of very nice hardware effects for the 4. There are some traditional ones, echo, delay, reverb, etc., and some more out there choices, scale down, riser, matrix and recycler for example. They all offer really good sound quality and plenty of control options thanks to the joystick and rotary encoder. A few final notes on the main effects. They are all post fader and post crossfader essential for me. You can save your personal selections to be recalled on boot up, which is a great touch, and you can switch over to controlling Serato's software effects should you wish. There are only 3 small grumbles I have with the effects. You can't assign to both decks on each side, which I wouldn't want often, but having the option would be nice. And although the effects paddles are fantastic, super solid and with a great feel, typical RANE, I did find myself accidentally switching effects once or twice when pushing the paddles away into the lock position, as those buttons are so close. Perhaps an option in settings to require a long press to change effects would be a good solution for that. The final one is that being hardware effects, they can be used with external sources on decks 3 and 4, great. But as always, RANE seem to be allergic to putting automatic audio BPM detection into their gear, so you'll be tapping tempo a lot. This won't be an issue for most 4 users, as it locks onto Serato DJ Pro's BPM automatically, but I'm going to keep mentioning it until RANE starts adding it to their stuff. But none of that is to take away from what are absolutely RANE's best hardware effects to date. I found them a touch too simple on the 70 and far too complex on the 72, but on the 4 they have absolutely nailed them. So with all that said, let's get on to the star of the show. Let's talk stems. So of course, when we're talking about the RANE 4, we have to discuss the different stems workflows on here, because that is clearly a big part of the whole idea behind this device, is to allow you to use stems in different and new ways, which we've not seen before. Now we have the traditional, I say traditional, it's only been around a few months, but the regular way of working with stems in Serato DJ Pro, which is to use a pad mode. We have a dedicated pad mode, drums, bass, melody, vocal, can all be muted from the top. And then we have the stems effects below. So if we jump a bit further in the track, we can echo out the vocal, echo out the instrumental, break the instrumental, and echo out the drums. So these, if you've been using stems in Serato DJ Pro, you'll be familiar with those right by now. So that's pretty standard. The problem with those is you can't do them at the same time as like a hot cue. Even with this split pad mode on here, which is great, you can't do the instrumental echo or whatever and a hot cue at the same time, because you just don't have access to that. So here on the RANE 4 we do have these instant stems buttons over here. So instant acapella, instant instrumental, just always at hand, whatever pad modes you've got rolling, just they're right there. And you got those on a shift layer as well. We can do the instrumental echo and the vocal echo. So that's very, very convenient. That's the thing. It's all about convenience there with those. They're great, work really well, but we can go one step further. Now, there's something that you kind of need to bear in mind when you're going to do the stem split feature, which is what we're going to look at now, is that it's going to put it onto this channel as well. It's going to split it into 2 parts, vocal here, instrumental here. So if we want to avoid any change in the audio when we do that, we need to make sure that everything's kind of lined up and the same across the 2 channels. So your parameter for your loop rolls, etc. needs to be the same. Your trim controls need to be pretty similar. Your EQs need to be in the same place, and the faders in the same place. And then if I hit stem split, you shouldn't really hear any change to the audio at all. So now it's doubled it across, it's instant doubled this track over to deck 3 as well. We're in dual deck mode here. So if I hit a hot cue, both aspects, both of these channels now are jumping to the same place. And if I use the platter, they're both scratching at the same time. If I adjust the pitch up and down, if I do a loop roll, they're rolling the same. If I do slicer, they're both slicing in the same way. So these 2 decks are basically as one right now, but they are separate, so we can do more with it. So we can take out the instrumental with the fader. We can take out the vocal with the fader. And that's a very natural motion for a DJ to be doing. You know, something that I've been doing when I've been performing with this is like taking out the beat and then slamming it back in. It's just such a natural motion. Slam it. Same with the vocal, in and out. You can use the crossfader. Bring them back in again. You can adjust the levels independently. So if I want to tweak, maybe I want a bit more vocal, I can bring up the trim on that, or adjust the EQ on the instrumental side. And then of course we can add effects on top of that as well. So I can filter out the instrumental. Bring it back in again. I can filter roll the vocal. And we can add the main effects to it as well. So we can choose one or the other. So you can't do both at once, but so I've assigned the effects to channel 1, which is the vocal. So now I'm just going to put an echo on the vocal. Switch that over to the instrumental. Bring it back in again. We can do the more extreme effects too. Do that on the vocal, do the scale. Do the riser. Or just do matrix. Any of the effects that live there within that main effects menu, you can apply them to either aspect of this track, which is fantastic. Like, it's just, the creative possibilities are just massive with this. They really, really are. If I want to do an a cappella out, I can filter out the instrumental, drop in the next track. Just so much coolness with this. But we can go one step further, and I've tried to record this demo multiple times now, and this is where I normally mess it up, because I'm no turntablist. This is a feature that I'm not probably going to be using that much myself, but the possibilities here, when this is in the right hands, are just massive, right? So they are synchronized right now. They're both together. Whatever I do, they are both together. We can split them further still. So if I was to now hit, let's jump a bit further in the track, hit deck 1. Now they are completely split. They're not in dual deck mode anymore. So if I mess with just now, I can scratch the vocal. So if you want to come out during a transition and just scratch a bit of the chorus or whatever while the beat's still going, or just a certain line from the track where you want to restructure it and rearrange it entirely, you can do that because you've just got this instant stem split ability. And then if we want to get back to where we were, we can just hit stem split again, and it's back to where it was. It is a feature that you'll have to be on top of. It's something you'll have to kind of be aware of what you're doing and make sure you're not going off beat with your cuts and then you jump back in and it's off beat, etc. There are some pitfalls for this potentially, and that's why I think, for my kind of DJing, I'm just using the synchronized dual deck mode in the split. That works better for me as a rule. If we want to just get back out of it, we hit stem split again, and we are just now back to one deck. This channel is now free completely, and we can just rearrange from there. So it's just, there's a lot of power here, and it could be dangerous in the wrong hands, but in the right hands, as I say, I see some very special stuff coming from this stem split mode. Stems on here is just, it's on a different level, absolutely different level. So there you go, my thoughts on the RANE 4. Between the prototype and the retail one I've got now, I've had one of these in hand for 3 months now altogether. And during that time, it has cemented itself as one of my favourite setups to DJ with. I just really enjoy it. I was already fully into Serato stems by the time this arrived. And this just takes that stem technology and brings whole new dimensions to it with the stem split and so on. It is fantastically fun to work with. So from that point of view, great. But the thing to remember is, even if stems is not your bag, if you're not that into stems, that's fine, because this is still a very competent and very well executed Serato DJ Pro controller in general. It's got 4 decks, it's got that great build quality, the sound is superb, the jog wheels feel great, and you've got the OLED displays on the pads, you've got those fantastic hardware effects. So it's just really well done in general as a Serato DJ Pro professional device, but it happens to have all that stem stuff in there as well. So whether you're into stems or not, it's a solid recommend from me. I think if you are looking for a pro level Serato DJ Pro controller, you won't go wrong with the RANE 4 at all. In the comments this week, I want to hear from you about the topic of platters. It's a thorny subject, right? But let's talk about it. What did you start with? Turntables, spinning platters? Did you move over to static jogs later? Did you start on controllers with static platters and then get into spinning platters later in your career? What is your preference? This is your chance to sound off in the comments below. Thank you for watching this episode of Beatsource Tech. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel and you turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. I'll see you next time.